Recording. And welcome. My name is Julie Fry, and today I'm joined by Brickson Diamond, and we're going to be talking about the importance of estate planning for Black Americans. As I mentioned, my name is Julie Fry. I'm one of the co-founders of Gentrio. We are an online estate planning platform, and we really call ourselves the next generation of estate planning because we want to make sure that estate planning is available and accessible to everyone. My background is actually in elder care and elder care planning. I worked at the National Association of Home Care and Hospice and started the National Private Duty Association. And we personally, my family went through putting together an estate plan for our parents. And when we did that, it cost us $10,000 to do an estate plan. And we walked out of that experience realizing that, number one, everyone needs estate planning. And number two, it is a really hard process that everybody needs to have access to, but there's such huge costs associated with it that there weren't great solutions. That's how we created Gentreo, because we wanted to make sure that everybody had that access to proper estate planning. Also today, we're joined by one of our board members, Brickson Diamond. And Brickson, if you could just quickly introduce yourself as well.
Certainly. Thank you so much, Julie, and thanks to Gentrio for hosting. And thanks to all for joining. I'm Brickson Diamond. I am a board member at Gentrio, an entrepreneur, and a bit of a DEI expert. But what brings me to Gentrio in this conversation is that I've had a long history of engagement around end-of-life issues and opportunities, and I mean opportunities based on a very sad experience of losing my mother at age 12. But she left a really solid estate plan, which really created pathways for opportunity for me and support throughout my adult life. And so I think about that, like Julie, I spent some time in the hospice movement. I was on the board of the National Hospice Foundation for 9 years, 2 of which I served as chair. So got a lot of exposure to the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization, which is a mouthful. But I've been super passionate about how do we answer this question for access to dignity at end of life, particularly for people of color and Black Americans even more specifically. So delighted to be with you today.
Throughout the presentation, we will be taking questions. So feel free to put your questions in the chat. And after the presentation, we will open it up for Q&A as well. So if you do have any specific questions or we can answer anything for you, please let us know. Today, we're really going to go over why estate planning is so critically important, especially for Black Americans. And we want to make sure that we focus on how estate planning can be really used as a tool for Black Americans to really bridge that wealth gap and make sure that they have access to reliable, excellent tools that will allow their community to protect all that they love. Estate planning itself, just to give everyone a high-level overview, it's more than just creating your will. It's more than just preparing for when you pass away. It's really about preparing your family and your loved ones now while you're still living. It allows you to take control over your choices and your assets. You get to decide who cares for your children, who inherits things upon your death, what your medical directives are, and gives you the opportunity to make sure that everything is organized. So God forbid, when something does happen, things aren't lost. People know where to turn, and everyone has a clear understanding of what your wishes are and what your intent is. Also, great estate planning makes sure that it provides that foundation so that if you prepare your documents and there's anything that you don't include within those documents, that your estate plan will catch that for you. So it doesn't cost extra time, legal fees, fights among family. With not doing estate planning, you're risking a lot. Not only are you risking the having fights amongst your family and making sure that everyone is organized. If you don't set up what your decisions are, and you don't have the legal documents to make sure those decisions are actually carried through, your family members are going to have to get the courts involved to make sure that you are, and your family is making the decisions they think that you want. Unfortunately, even if they do get involved and they get lawyers involved, the decisions that you want may not be what the judges and the courts actually set up. What we want to do is we want to make sure that you have a chance to set up what your choices are. You have a chance to organize your family so that your assets, your children, your loved ones don't get stuck in state, which basically means that your state decides everything for you. And again, not only is it loss of control, but it's loss of your assets. Because if you don't have an estate plan in place and you have to get lawyers involved, the courts involved, you can lose 3 to 8% of your state's value. And so instead of your loved ones getting your assets, you end up giving them to lawyers, and we don't want that to happen.
I might jump in here, Julie, and talk a bit about the state of play for Black Americans and why we need help in estate planning now. We're on the cusp of this huge wealth transfer, $70 trillion. I'm on a personal crusade to really impact the economic empowerment of Black Americans across the spectrum. So this is not just for rich folks. This is for folks across the economic landscape, thinking about where you are and what you have and how you want to steward that wealth. And so wealth is personal. We think about wealth as I look at boards I've served on as work, wealth, and wisdom. So you put in a lot of work to amass whatever you have to leave as a legacy, which are your deeds and your monetary assets. But you've also got a lot of wisdom, and we hope you get more wisdom through this process because you understand, how these legal systems that Julie just described work, right? So you got that knowledge. You understand what you actually have, because you can wake up one day and not realize that you haven't taken stake of what's there and what's at risk. And 3 out of 4 Black Americans are unprepared for these questions. And then finally, only 27% of Black Americans have a will. So we've seen it in the press. We've seen all the stories of the famous people with either multiple wills or no will at all. And just be super frank, now their business is all on the streets, because we know it because it's in the courts, number one. That leaves their families more vulnerable to folks who don't have the best intentions. That is folks from, just cousins and surprise relatives to lawyers and the government. But also, they haven't been able to transfer that that wisdom that they have around this process, that wisdom they've had in the world. They haven't been able to steward the work that they've done and pursued so carefully and diligently to the next generation, right? So if we as Black and Hispanic Americans and the folks of descent are twice as unlikely as white Americans to have a plan, we have the power to change that, right? We don't have all the powers in the world, but we have those powers. We can change the planning to steward what we have and pass it on to the next generation. If we go to the next slide, one thing I told you in my introduction, I lost my mother when I was age 12. That was back in the 80s. But there are today more than 140,000 kids in the US who've lost a parent or primary caretaker because of the pandemic. And so you think about the millions and millions of lives that have been lost, and you think about the children who've been left behind. And 1 in every 310 Black children has lost a parent or grandparent. We know we've been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. It was not an equal opportunity invader or pandemic. It really impacted the poor, the underrepresented and diverse communities more intensely and harshly. And that's important to think about. Again, my passion was adolescent and childhood grief when I worked in the Hospice Foundation, but I expanded that because there were so many opportunity and spaces to bring more nobility and dignity into life. And as we think about estate planning, it really is that dignity for you and for your family as you think about it. Next slide, if you would. So it closes a gap, right? Estate planning, as Julie's talked about, is not just about the will. There's so many elements that allow you to bring some leveling to the playing field that really lead to generational wealth and close the wealth gap. Again, work, wealth, and wisdom are the things we're talking about. You protect the wealth that you built. You're transferring knowledge, both the road you've taken to get there, but also how to steward that wealth. You're ensuring that future generations receive their maximum inheritance. Again, opportunities in my life were created by someone who did some planning in the 80s that benefited me in the 80s, in the 90s, in the 2000s. And so it's been super powerful of carrying that legacy forward through a pretty simple process. And that wisdom, right? So I worked in the wealth management business for 11 years. I didn't mention that. And I had one set of clients where the parents raised their children in a very middle-class setting. And so the parents unfortunately died in pretty rapid succession as the kids were young adults. And the lawyer sat them down, and we should all have this challenge, and told them that they had $40 million each. The parents had not told them the magnitude of the wealth, had not told them how the structures were pursued, gave them no clues and no education, and certainly no personal guidance and reference as to why they were doing the things they were. These clients of mine, these 4 20-somethings, 20 years later, their entire lives are consumed with managing the complicated web of trust their parents have created for them. Again, problem we all wish we could have, I think, but not a problem we wish we could leave on our heirs and our successors, right? You don't want to do that. You don't want it to be a surprise, and that's a balancing act. You don't want to disincent people from being engaged, active contributors, but you also don't want to saddle them with burdens that prevent them from being engaged, active contributors to the world. But it also finally allows you to establish, and I would add the word revisit goals, right? So this is not a one and done thing where you do a will and you put it away. We're thinking about estate planning, which is a holistic piece that allows you to take stock of what you have, take stock of what you are building, and understand how you want to steward that and provide the next generation opportunity to increase and build. And again, as Black Americans, where we started, as we all know, with disadvantages, with lack of access to property, with lack of access to education, we have those things within our reach now, within our universe, within our realities. We want to make sure that we are building generational opportunity, and estate planning is, we believe, a key tool for doing that. Julie, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Brickson. I think that you gave some great insight, and thank you for sharing your personal story as well, because you are unfortunately like so many people that we have seen in the past who, when a situation or life happens, if they have a plan in place, it gives them the opportunity to actually focus on what their goals are instead of being bogged down in actually disentangling the estates and going through probate and hiring lawyers, etc. At Gentrio, we developed an online estate planning tool, kind of equated to TurboTax for estate planning, that really makes estate planning doable and accessible to everyone. It's easy to do. It's across all 50 states and DC, and allows you to create those really critical legal documents that we've already talked about. We've mentioned before that will, and then we also offer a living trust. And one of the most powerful documents that you have are your powers of attorney. There's a power of attorney for healthcare, which allows the user to set up what their medical directives are, and almost just importantly, allows them to have that HIPAA release so that not only does your family know what your choices are, but they also have that legal document so that they can talk to your doctors and your medical staff, and they have the ability to actually take action on your choices because they have that legal document. This is very, very important for people who have children over the age of 18, because as a legal adult, even if they're on your health insurance, or even if you're supporting them in college or they're living at home with you, unless you have a legal document which allows you to talk to your child's caregivers, you cannot do so. So we very much encourage anybody who goes off to college to make sure that they have that healthcare proxy in place. It's important for all of us to have, especially during this time of the pandemic, where our lives, and we all know these situations can turn very quickly, but we also want to make sure that our family is prepared. Our name is Gentrio because we actually want to make sure that we can care for not only ourselves and our children, but our parents as well. So these documents that you need to create for yourself should also be created for your parents as well, because you don't want them to leave you a mess if something happens to them. With a a package and a program like Gentreo, you can get in and you can create documents for yourself as well as for your parents as well. What we do is we help guide you through the process. So we are not a legal firm. We don't offer specific legal advice, though we do have partner lawyers that we've vetted and we can forward you to if you do need that specific help. But we have online coaches that can help you address what your specific situation is so that you know that what decisions that you have made, what the implication of those decisions are, and that you have those legal documents to make sure that they represent what your life is. In addition, what's also really unique, and so Brickson mentioned, we aren't just estate planning isn't just one and done. It's not something where you can create a will, put it in your drawer and think about it and don't think about it again for 40 years. Your life changes. Your babies, people get married, people get divorced, they purchase new assets. As your life changes, your estate plan should reflect those changes. With Gentreo, our online program allows you to easily adapt your estate plan so that you can change your estate plan as your life changes. Not only do you create your documents, and this is really important too, all of your documents you can create with Gentreo for one price, which is $100 if you create just your will or if you create all of your documents. And that membership entitles you to the Gentreo coaches as well as your digital vault. That digital vault is a really key part of an estate plan because it's that one place that you can make sure that your family gets all the information they need in the event of an emergency. So for example, if you upload your executed will and you upload information into your digital vault as well, whether it's information you bring along, like copies of your insurance plans, or we have informational cards to help get you thinking about what information is great to have in an emergency. You as the user can invite your friends and your family to get into your digital vault, get that access to that information so that everybody knows what your latest decisions are, has the latest access to information, and they all have the ability to make sure that your wishes are carried out. When you invite the team members, all of your team members access your information free of charge, and it's all done safely and securely. You control who sees what information. You can edit control. So if you want your neighbor to get your pet information, like your pet information card or your pet power of attorney, or if you want your daughter who's 6 states away to get access to everything, you remain in control. In addition, we also, and Brickson mentioned this before, talk about legacy, because what we want to do is we want to make sure that you are preparing and storing and sharing your legacy. So from memorial videos, which we'll create for you, to letters to loved ones, to pictures and family recipes, you have the ability to set up what your legacy is and share those with your loved ones. And then we also have tools throughout the estate planning process so that we can help you along the way, like with decisions like funeral planning. We can help you with assets and tracking your assets. Our goal is to create that one home so that we can guide you throughout the estate planning process, making sure that you have the tools that are affordable, that are easy, that are safe, secure, and accessible. In general, the way that Gentrio works is you create the documents based on what your specific situation is. You personalize those on your own, and if at any time you need help, you can reach out to a Gentrio coach who can help you along the process. From there, you upload your information and your documents and you share that so that everybody has that home to go to. And then if anything does happen, everyone has that instant access, so that if, for us, unfortunately, our father just passed away from Alzheimer's. And as he was going through his end of life process, and he would have medical emergencies, we'd get a call from our mom from Pennsylvania, and we're in Boston. And it was such a relief for her for two reasons. Number one, she could get on her phone with the press of a few buttons and access that information that she had uploaded, and she had access in the hospital. She had access to contacts. She had access to his medical information, and she was able to control that. And then also it became a huge support for us, because when dad did get to the end of his life, he just passed away this summer, and they asked, do you want to put him on life support? It really changed the narrative. So instead of us making that decision and feeling like mom had to take the onus of making that decision, it allowed us to make sure that we were saying that this is what dad wants. And so we were able to be left with an idea of that dad is still in control. And then finally, everything is kept up to date. So whether it's a change in your life, like a baby or a grandchild, or if you want to change or add permissions, all updates are included in that yearly membership fee. So from here, we really want to make sure that we address any questions. And then one of the questions that we had addresses the fact that there is somebody who has assets that they want to make sure that they can transfer to their loved ones, but they created a will 30 years ago. In terms of if they need a trust in addition to a will, it's really dependent upon what you would want the trust for. A living trust allows you to do two things, primarily. A living trust allows you to help avoid probate, and because it moves your assets. So instead of you having, when you pass away, everything gets transferred over to the will, that you transfer your through the will, you transfer your assets prior to you passing away. It's while you're still living. And so by doing that, that allows you to avoid probate, to allow people to get access to those monies right away. So for instance, if anything did happen, they could actually go in and access bank accounts, retirement, etc. And so your trust allows you to avoid, in general, probate. In addition, it allows you an element of privacy, because if things do go to court and you have to go through probate, in your will, the will is a public document in general. And then if a trust is actually allows you to put assets into that trust without having to disclose who the assets go to, etc. In terms of when you created your will, unless you had major changes to your state, no matter if you make your will now or you make your will 30 years ago, it most likely is still valid. And so that whatever you set up 30 years ago, as long as everything is still up to date, like you didn't have divorces, you didn't have the executor of your estate still chooses and you still have the same executor, as long as all that information is still the same, your will is still valid and should be good to go.
I would say, Julie, I love the answer on the privacy piece, because, $2-3 million is, quite candidly, a nice figure for someone who wants to target your family, right? And so having some signals about that amount of money being moved to your heirs, I think that's a pretty big magnet. Number one, and number two, I think when they asked, you talked about executor, is the person you named still alive 30 years later, and do you still like them? right. I want to think about that.
No, and it's interesting because one of the other employees he's kind of like the worst case scenario. We had the best case scenario where we paid the 10 grand and were able to use it as our father came to the end of his life. Our chief finance officer his father passed away, had a really old will that named his ex-wife as the executor, and then the other people who were named as backup chose not to do it. And so he spent almost 3 years now in court trying to settle his dad's estate. And so making sure that you review your estate plan is critically important. One of the other questions that came in was about what the Gentrio yearly fee is. So we charge $100 per year, and that you can create any document, any amount of documents. If you just want to create your will, that's fine. If you want to create all of your documents, like your will, your power of attorney, your healthcare proxy, etc., you can create all of your documents and update all those documents and have that digital vault for that membership fee. For us, it was all about making estate planning accessible. And so instead of spending that thousands of dollars, you can spend only $100 to make sure you have all those legal documents created. And then each member of your family, adult member, needs their own estate plan. So if you are married, you both need to have your own estate plan, because the decisions that you make, for example, on your healthcare proxy or on your will, may not be the same as your partner. And so it is important that each person has their own estate plan. And also having, even if you are married, an estate plan allows you to make sure that if there are any individual assets, that they are transferred to your spouse or whoever you want them transferred to. So it is important that each person has their own estate plan, and each person for Gentrio has their own membership.
Julie, I think on the second year too, it's $50, right? So
Right.
it's $100 for the first year for each person, and then it goes to $50. So for that second year, third year, whatever, you not only get all the storage, but you can change any of your documents. You can update them. And if you didn't create a trust the first time around, now you've decided, because of what Brickson talked about as we grow our wealth, you now need a trust. That's already included because that's part of the Gentrio membership. We want to stay with people throughout their lives, because one of the things we really try to help with are things we call life inflection points. It's getting married, having kids, having grandkids, making sure that your estate planning stays with you across your lifetime. And then it can always be used as well, because so many people go through what Julie and I went through around having a father who had 7 strokes. And each time my mom never knew where the healthcare proxy was. We're like, hit the button, Mom. Now you can find it with Gentrio. You can get that. You can store his medication list and doctor's information there as well. And so what we're trying to do is really make sure that people have a tool to be able to help them throughout their lives and throughout all of those instances where they might need estate planning.
I would also add that it's a great way to take stock, right? So I will make a confession that between my career moves, I've never paid much attention to my life insurance, right? So I would leave a company, life insurance they have for me would lapse, and I would just sort of keep merrily along. After a 30-year career, I've left a lot of money on a lot of tables from not carrying those policies with me. And I think by going through the estate planning process, you get to take better stock of what you have. And so when you're making a career move, we encourage annual visits and sort of not every 2 days, but a sort of more constant engagement with the platform. But the reason to really be engaged for more than a year is that so you put everything in one place, and your financial planner can certainly help with this. So that's the other alternative. But this is a little more self-served and a little more focused, and you can just sort of keep stock of your assets. And when you move, say, what's this asset that I may be letting lapse or may not be paying attention to? So it's not just a plan for the next generation. It really is an opportunity to sort of sit back and look at what you have and take advantage of the opportunities you don't want to lose just from sort of busyness or just sort of innocent neglect.
And then one other final question was, what about updates? So specifically for Gentrio, as part of the membership, all of your updates are included. So we actually will notify you if something happens in your state and tell you what changes happen in your state and give you tools to update it based on those changes. But most importantly, if your life changes, you can get in and update your documents as needed. That's all included in that membership fee. And so if you want to change your healthcare proxy decisions, or if you want to update your will, That's all part of your membership, and all of those documents are included for that one membership price. And as Renee said, it's $100 the first year, $50 after that per year. I know that we're about out of time, and so I did want to make sure that everyone knew, if you have additional questions, feel free to email us directly at info@gentrio.com. If you're interested, there's more information at gentrio.com, which will give you more information on estate planning in general, about the product. And then if you do need specific help, reach out to us and we'll make sure we get one of our team members back in touch with you ASAP. I want to thank you all again for attending, and Brickson, especially you, thank you so much for sharing your story, for sharing your insights, and for all of the work that you're doing to help encourage people in the Black community to support those and really powerful initiatives. And thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me. Thanks everyone for joining.